Praise the Lord, my beautiful blessed souls. I know it's been a while, but I'm back with another word. We are in February, what is it, March the 17th? And this word says perspective. How can I praise God when life is difficult? Now, this has been something that I'm not sure if I'm just the only one, but we think about like backsliding, we think about fallen ones or who have fallen, or we think about now the time when they talk about, there are going to be ones who are going to fall away, and then there's going to be ones who come into the kingdom at this time, and there's going to be the separation and all these things. We're going to talk about what goes on and what happens. I'm going to read this real quick and we're going to get into it. Life can be difficult for any number of reasons. You may experience the consequences of your own sin. You may suffer because someone else's sin. You may be caught in circumstances that are no one's fault. God may be testing your faith, or you may be a target for Satan, who wants to disrupt your godly influence and discourage you. In any of these tough circumstances, there is reason to praise God. He redeems our mistakes, teaches us wisdom through adversity, promises to help us through tough times, and guarantees eternal life free from suffering for all who are his followers. A God who redeems all trouble is a God worthy of praise. God's response: Joseph told them, "Don't be afraid of me. Am I God to judge and to punish you? As far as I am concerned, God turned into good what was meant for evil." That was in Genesis 50:19-20. Then be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid of the king of Assyria or his mighty army, for there is a power far greater on our side. That was 2 Chronicles 32:7. No matter what happens, always be thankful, for this is God's will for you who belong to Christ. 1 Thessalonians 5:18. And he will remove all of their sorrows, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. For the old world and its evils are gone forever. Revelation 21:4. So now I'm getting into this because we see a lot of times there's a lot of things going on in our health that we're not paying attention. I keep talking about whole health, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and spiritually, which plays big roles with everything. They all tie into what is going on in our lives. And I myself have been going through a lot of different things. And I myself have been trying to figure out what is going on. But there's multiple things going on at the same time. So this is why it is so hard to just focus on one thing. Sometimes it is our mental health because of we're going to get into it. Sometimes it is our physical bodies that are actually breaking down because of all of these things that are going on. A lot of people, when there's fear, there's, uncertainty, there's doubt, there's worry, there's trust issues, unforgiveness, bitterness, whenever those things are going on, and usually it's because something's going on in their lives. It could be prayer lives are disrupted, or whatever's going on in your life, and particularly with your family, with your friends, with your job, with your coworkers, whatever. Then you can go through a period of where you feel like you're not getting anywhere as far as your walk with God. You're not hearing from him. You're not, something's off, something's wrong, and you could be doing all of the things that you're supposed to be doing, or you're not getting the harvest, the blessings, the breakthroughs that you have been fighting so hard for. And when these things happen, this is a lot of what, or there could be great expectations that were not met, along with disappointments, discouragements, things that we wanted that didn't happen. And from time to time, they will throw us off. And it is about perspective. And that was what I just read, because we have to think about the perspective. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, when people get sick or someone dies, a loved one dies, and different things that, these are things that we're just supposed to sit here and be like, oh, just toss it to the side. No, because these things are real life issues, just like we're going to war right now, or we're at war. All of the things, whether they're in our lives and particularly, or they're in our environment, whatever it is, does affect us. Okay, please do not get that twisted, whether it's in the spiritual realm and or in the natural realm, and they usually are working at the same time. So let's get into it, because we want to get down, and this one may be kind of long. I may have to actually do part 1 and part 2, or however I may have to do it, because it is a lot. We talked about how, the mental, the physical, all of these things. So we're going to get into it. Okay, and we're going to talk about society, we're going to talk about men, we're going to talk about women, we're going to discuss, age, gender, all of these things, because all of these things play a role. Why? Because depending on where you are at whatever particular time, whether you're male or female, at what age, what color, what race, all of these things play actual parts as to what can be happening in your life. So we're going to get into it. Let me see. Okay, let me go back. Okay. So what I had put in, I was looking, I was just kind of, between the perspective thing and just going through what I've been going through, because I know I've been going, I had some things going on that I had to take care of. So when we look at fear, doubt, worry, anxiety, trust issues, unforgiveness, and all of these things, bitterness, hate, when we look at disappointments, we will look at, like I was telling you before, great expectations, things that are not met. This is how we get to these places to where, and then especially if we're isolated, depending on the age bracket, if we're male or female, certain things can be going on at the same time, especially for women, because around certain ages, women, our estrogen and all of that, once we start going through menopause, that starts switching up on us. So that plays a factor as well as to what is going on in our lives. And because of that, it can have a chemical imbalance inside of us, which will naturally throw us off. It will make our emotions emotional, so we might need to look in these things too, because if you're menopausal or premenopausal, it can be a factor, whether it's weight gain, hair loss, depending on what it is, who you are, what you're doing, your diet, all of these things is going to play a big part. So first we're going to get into, let me see, because I got to go back. It's so much information that I have right now, and I'm hoping I'm going to get to go through it all. Okay. So I put in my information, and I'm going to just speak on just giving, blueprints of, because I'm a Black woman, I'm in America, I'm 46 years old, I have 4 children, my demographics, and then we'll go from there as to, how these things affect us in our lives, not just me, but, just women in general, all these other things. So I gotta go all the way back. This thing is so long. I am so hoping that I'm gonna get through this one, because it is a lot. Being discouraged, like I said, having great expectations, striving for things or things that have not. So what I was looking up, I started out looking up medical stuff. So I'm going to look at anemia. Now, anemia happens when your body doesn't have enough healthy red blood cells or hemoglobin, and there are 3 big pathways that lead to it. Either not making enough, or losing too much, or destroying them too fast. A healthcare professional can help you sort out which category applies if you're having symptoms like fatigue, weakness, or shortness of breath. Now, I just did that just as a, blueprint, so we can get started. So now, these are major issues. These are major medical issues grounded in current clinical sources. Anemia is not making enough red blood cells. This is one of the most common pathways that happens when the body lacks the building blocks needed to produce blood. So that is an iron deficiency. So like I said, when you are, you're looking at yourself and you're going, you're trying to get things done, whatever that may be in life. It could be a spiritual situation, natural, whatever you're doing. When your body itself is not functioning at its highest peak, meaning if you already have like things like anemia, if you're already menopausal, if you have high blood pressure, diabetes, whatever these things are, you must understand, depending on what is going on, how high impact, meaning how stressful your life is, meaning how many hats you wear in life. This is what happens, because remember, especially as women, and I'm going to say this as Black women, we carry a lot of weight, especially because usually we're in single households. This is why having 2 people in the household is such an important thing. Why? Because the women, we look at statistics, we see that their hair loss is at a greater rate. They're dying off, or getting sick, or having all of these extra conditions in their life, such as blood pressure, high blood pressure, such as diabetes, such as anemia, such as cancer, breast cancer, whatever type of cancer, such as heart issues, inflammation issues, whatever. Now we look at these things and we see them as slightly, as nothing, but in all actuality, it is a very big thing. Why? Because we're not meant to be by ourselves. We're not meant to raise families alone. We're not meant to do certain things. So when we look at the world and what they have portrayed of us, as especially as Black women, being a single, being alone, being so-called ghetto, ratchet, they want to put these certain stereotypes of us. If we don't look this way, if we don't have this, if we don't do this, if we don't do that, then we're not. And then our own men will be up there speaking these things. I would say they have their issues as well. As a Black woman, I have raised 3 men, but I am not a man. So I can only speak somewhat of what goes on with them. It would take a male himself to speak on those issues, because they have themselves their own set of issues when it comes to their mental health, their emotional, physical, financial, and spiritual as well. And I say that because, and depending on what race and what gender and all of these things that they are and what areas they are in their life, because when you're starting out younger, you don't have a lot of these issues. You can kind of, do anything with your hair. You look any kind of way because you're at that age when you're younger, that you're more supple, you're more, but as you start to age and as you start to, pay attention, it's time to start paying attention to your body, because it could be more than just spiritual attacks. These could be physical attacks, meaning things that you do not know and understand are happening to yourself because you're just thinking, oh, I didn't drink enough water, but it could be something more going on. So this is why I'm bringing this up, because the more high impact, more high stressful, you may be in life, meaning depending on the hats that you hold, the titles that you have in life, you could actually be depleting yourself, because if you already have stuff going on, stuff you may know of and are treating, and stuff that you may not know of. Okay, these can be the underlying factors. And I'm saying this because people are finding out, especially women. We have the men's side as well, because a lot of them, they don't do the prostate things like they're supposed to. They don't take care of themselves. And this is another thing with the men, especially with the marriage and all of this and the cheating and the having sex and all this, because the pHs is off. They're dipping and dabbing. They're not protecting themselves. They're not keeping themselves up. When you're around people, and if you notice, a lot of people have odors nowadays, especially when they're smoking weed and all this stuff. You can tell when people drink a lot, when they smoke a lot, because you can smell it through their pores. There tends to be off. This is the smell of the demon, the smell of the whatever. This is what that is. You can smell it, whether they're breath, whether they're whatever. You can walk past them and literally it will linger after they have gone. The stench of whether it's the weed, the smelling like a skunk, whatever it is. So whether it's the alcohol or whatever it is they're doing. So now when you think about these things, it means a lot, because that also is knocking their pH off in their body. Okay, that's making them full of what? Toxins. So now if they're sleeping around and they're doing all of this stuff and they're having sex with other women, or, sleeping with their main partner, whatever, this is what all of this is, God says this is all because this is not what we're supposed to be doing. Commingling, one of our bloods, excreting, like I said this before, whenever, men and women get together and they're having sex, women usually have to detox themselves much more because they are the ones who carry the DNA. So the men screening sperm inside of you, you're carrying that DNA inside of you. So there's a lot going on. So now when we talk about these things, like I said, I started talking about this with anemia. That means you're not making enough red blood cells, your iron is deficient. So when you have this going on, which a lot of us do, especially when you're in your menopausal phase. Why? Because the estrogen is lower, all of these things are lower. This is why we have to start really paying attention to our bodies in the natural, because when they start to do certain things, we have to be paying attention. I myself have gone through fibroids twice and all these other things. So these have already been issues that I've had, but I just want to, just discuss them. This could be high blood pressure for some of us. This could be, heart issues. It could be diabetes for some of us. Whatever it is for you, you can replace it with this, but make sure you're looking these things up, because you want to look at every actual cause of what is going on, because there's a natural realm and then there's the spiritual, but it also affects your financial, affects all of these areas. Why? Especially for people who are low income and low status, because you will only be able to, get the care you need based off of who and what you are in life. Remember, this is a part of this system. So we're going to get into iron deficiency. This is one of the most common pathways that happens when the body lacks the building blocks it needed to produce blood. Iron deficiency is the most common cause worldwide that can come from low dietary iron or slow blood loss, such as heavy periods or ulcers. Remember that also is with the people with, who may suffer from the fibroids. That's something they need to look into. It could be a vitamin B12 deficiency from low intake or poor absorption, like pernicious anemia. Folate deficiency, often related to diet and or increased needs, meaning if you're pregnant. Chronic inflammation, conditions like kidney disease, cancer, HIV, rheumatoid arthritis, or Crohn's disease can suppress red blood cells and cell production. Bone marrow disorders like leukemia, myelofibrosis, and or marrow disease can interfere with blood production. So these are things. Aplastic anemia, rare but serious. The marrow stops producing enough blood cells, sometimes due to infectious toxins or autoimmune issues. So these are things we need to be paying attention to. We need to start paying attention to our bodies a lot, especially the older we're getting, especially as women. Because like I said, because once you start to age, now, the sad thing with this is because these are the issues. You want to have someone there with you. You want to meet someone young. You want to get married. You want to do all these things. And a lot of times, sometimes that's not the case. A lot of times what we're seeing now is a lot of us, especially blacks, being alone, male and female in our upper age, because whatever we've done in our younger age, we're reaping the benefits of it now. And this is what it is. Why? Because if you were a player and you never settled down, or you dipped and dabbed their whole life, no one's taking you seriously now, because guess what? You're older now. And guess what? Just like the woman is older, it's the same thing. No one wants to be there just to change your diapers and all these type of things. Folks want to be there when you're young. They want to be there when you're rejuvenated. They want to put in the work and reap the benefits of it then. They don't want to come in and have to take care of what someone else did not want to be bothered with, or what you played around with when you were younger. So these are the issues. Why? Because the older we get, the more we have to take care of ourselves. Our children grow up and they move out and they leave. If we have a spouse, or if we had a spouse and we're no longer with them, these are things that we need to be paying attention to, because we have to make sure that we're going to be able to take care of ourselves regardless. And this is where God comes in at. That's where the mentally they're able to, take care of yourself, or your emotional, your financial, your physical, and more than anything, your spiritual, because it's about you being able to make sure that you're going to be okay. And once you get to these areas in life, this is what it is. You may or may not get married again. It may or may not happen. We all want those things, but sometimes those things don't happen. We have to be realistic. I know they play around a lot with the kingdom spouses. They play a lot with a lot of things, but everybody is not going to be married. I've seen it, especially a lot of women in the churches, especially black women. It is sad that we are the least married, the least this. It's sad that, they marry outside of our races. They do all these things. And like I said before, if you look back in our the videos I've done in the past, I've done a couple. It was called The Making of a Slave, and it talked about a lot when it came to slavery and the mentality of us and what was instilled in us, and how we see that affecting in us now with our race, color, creed, all these things, what they put before us, how they work together, they get married, they make sure that we marry outside, or we don't marry each other, or we're not together, because all of those things, marriage brings wealth. Why? Because two incomes will always outdo one. This is, so getting married, staying married, and having, certain things in place is going to better your life, your lineage. This is why God put it in place in the first place. Why? So that you can build and have a life and legacy to leave your children together, so that one person is not stuck holding the bag. This is how this person hemorrhages out. This is like the woman with the issue of blood, where she just hemorrhaged out her money, her time, her energy, her effort to everyone else, and then she had nothing left. So she had to go get what she needed from God. Why? Because whatever was going on, whether it was her mental, emotional, physical, financial, and spiritual well-being, whether she had children, a husband, whatever happened, she depleted herself because she let her life force, all of her everything, deplete, meaning she continued to give and press and try, and it didn't work. And so she's continuing to bleed out, but no one's pouring back. And this is where we are, especially with a lot of Black women. We look at ourselves and we watch ourselves, and they talk about how we're so terrible, how we're this, with that. And we see the Black men on there more than anyone tearing us down. And it's sad, it's ridiculous. They talk about, oh, the men, listen, the Black male needs to get in place, and he should have been in place, and he needs to stay in place. Whether the woman was on Section 8 or not, a lot of the men were still living with these women. We talk about all of these things that are so irrelevant. They talk about child support as if women get child support. Child support was set up for the government. They get the child support. 9 times out of 10, the woman does not get the child support. This is a thing that they keep talking about. They swear, honey, if a woman get $50 of that child support, if she even ever exceeds it. Why? Because whatever benefits that she's receiving will be from the government. And if she had to do that, it's because she was alone and she had to do what she had to do. Everyone's talking about, oh, she shouldn't be on government services. So what do you want her to do? Starve the children and not allow her children to live, feed, and have things? This is what this is about. Now, people talk all of this foolishness, but even with a lot of 2-income households, they themselves are struggling. So imagine what a person with one household is doing. She's going through a lot. And it is a full, total mental, emotional, physical, financial, and spiritual situation, because she's being drained. She's being depleted. Why? Because no one is really putting back what it is that she needs. So losing blood faster than the body can replace it. Blood loss removes red blood cells and the iron inside of them. Heavy menstrual bleeding, gastrointestinal bleeding, such as ulcers, polyps, cancers, and or chronic inflammation, surgery and or injury. So if you had surgery, this is, frequent blood donation, slow hidden bleeding that drains iron stores over time. So these are things we need to be looking for. Destroying of the red blood cells too quickly, hemolysis. Sometimes the body breaks down red blood cells faster than it can make them. Inherited conditions like sickle cell anemia, thalassemia, autoimmune hemolytic anemia. The immune system attacks red blood cells. Certain medications and or toxins, infections, mechanical destruction, for example, from artificial heart valves. Now, also what I was looking into too, a lot of the stuff that's in our foods and a lot of the stuff that is in our skincare regimens, such as soap, body wash, washing powder, a lot of these things also play very big factors. We have to start paying attention to these things too, because I myself have been looking into all of these things. A lot of these soaps are destroying your skin, which is the first barrier. A lot of us have eczema. A lot of us has different disorders. And guess what? A lot of it is adding to it, if not so, just because of the soaps and creams that we're using. So, and then it is an internal thing. It's a candida thing. So it's usually a yeast thing. So a lot of people may have to change their diets completely. Why? Because it would better help what is going on. Now, these factors that increase the risk, these don't cause anemia by themselves, but make it more likely. And remember, we haven't added stress onto these things. I'm going to go through them. We're going to add stress. Diet low in iron, B12, or folate. Pregnancy without supplementation. Chronic disease, kidney disease, cancer, autoimmune conditions, alcohol overuse. This is where the alcohol and the drug use and all these other things, whether cigarettes, I myself have went through that, also play factors. Age, over 65, family history of inherited anemia. So we don't know what all is going on with the family as well. These things can also play a part, because when you already have certain things in your family, we already know it is a chance that you will have it as well. Why this matters for us, because we've been discussing different things like tiredness, depletion, long-term strain, stress. These are things, symptoms can be physical, they can be emotional, they can be symbolic, they can be layers, that medically persistent symptoms, meaning fatigue, weakness, energy levels, because sometimes we feel drained. Clinically, we should be evaluated about it. You should go to the doctor to be seen. Anemia is common. It is treatable within the cause matters. Each type has a different solution. So we got to understand that. But it all have different, if it's anemia, whatever it is, it has a spiritual, a mental, emotional, physical, financial, and a spiritual thing as well. We have to look at it in a whole situation. Why? Because these things are going to affect you in every area. So if we're open, so we're going to continue to look on. I put in heart and inflammation issues, because some people have heart issues. Some people have, I'm just putting them into look. Heart issues and inflammation can absolutely connect to anemia, and the leak runs in directions when the heart is under strain and or the body is in chronic inflammatory state. The system that makes and regulates the red blood cells get disrupted, and when anemia is present, it can worsen the heart symptoms because the heart has to work harder to deliver oxygen. A clinician should evaluate these symptoms, especially when heart and inflammation concerns overlap. But it can walk you through how these pieces fit together so you can understand what might be happening in your body. Why? Because the heart is another main thing. Why? Stress. When you look at stress, when you look at yourself, when you look at trust, worry, doubt, all of these things that are going on, when you look at your environment, how you live, if it's a high stress, I keep saying this over and over again, we have to pay attention to these things, because sometimes these things are not always what they call spiritual. Meaning it can have a spiritual effect to it, but it doesn't mean, it just means that something's going on. Now remember, depending on your economic factors, meaning, remember, these kingdoms and systems of Satan in the world, they have already, especially when it comes to blacks, they have already redlined us. They have already put things in place. Their rules, their regulations, their laws, their government systems are set up to keep us in a state of what? Panic, depletion consistently. Okay, so because we're already in these areas, and that's in mental, emotional, physical, financial, and spiritual, we are already at enslaved, or because they have things set up to where it blocks us naturally from moving forward or having the better education, or the better, medical, or, depending on, you see what I'm saying? Because we have to understand, in certain areas, the schools are better, certain areas, they're not. You see what I'm saying? So these all play a major factor in these things. Now, how inflammation causes anemia. Inflammation changes your body. It handles how it handles iron, how your bone marrow makes blood. Medical sources describe several mechanisms. Remember, even there was a lot of iron, lead poisoning in those projects. Remember, projects is, there was a lot of drugs. Why? It's by design, and this is what it is. Iron gets locked away in storage instead of being released into the bloodstream, so your marrow can't use it to make red blood cells. Kidneys make less erythropoietin, which is EPO, the hormone that tells your bone marrow to produce red blood cells. Bone marrow becomes less responsive to the signals that normally stimulate blood production, and red blood cells die sooner, so your body can't keep up with replacing them. This pattern is called anemia of inflammation and or anemia of chronic disease, and it's the second most common type of anemia after iron deficiency. So remember, a lot of times when you're in different areas, you have poor diet, you have poor this, you have poor that, because of these reasons. And you can start out this way. This is already in your family. This was already there. This is what we're talking about. So a lot of these things we need to be paying attention. And when we look at these things, because the backsliding, because the difficulties, because the thorns, thistles choke out the word, because the issues of life, that is what it's about, chokes out the seed that comes into you. So this is how a lot of people backslide. A lot of people, are discouraged. A lot of people, expectations. A lot of people, breakthroughs, harvest, all these things that they're waiting for, the anticipation of these things being relieved of them in life, and when they are not. So this is why we're going to look into all of this, and we're going to pay attention to it, okay? See how it all factors in. This pattern is called, so we done went through this. This pattern is called anemia of inflammation, anemia of chronic disease, and the second most type of anemia after deficiency. Heart problems, anemia, how they interact, heart conditions, especially heart failure or coronary artery disease, which a lot of us have and suffer from, right? Why? Because of the foods we eat. But a lot of times we are not either able to get the high level foods because of the finances. Why? A lot of times the groceries in your area are much more higher. Also, when you want to eat better, you have to have the finances to do so, because live foods or healthy foods, they don't last as long. So one, you have to pay more for them and you get less of them. So this is also another way, and when we discuss these things, I'm discussing them to be honest, to be upfront about these things. And this is how we get here. Often coexists with inflammation. The inflammation can trigger anemia, and the anemia can then worsen to heart symptoms. Medical studies show people with heart disease often have high inflammatory markers, and those with both inflammatory and anemia have worse outcomes. Anemia forces the heart to pump harder to deliver oxygen, which can worsen fatigue, shortness of breath, and swelling. In chronic heart failure, anemia is common and often under-recognized, even though it is significantly affects energy levels and heart strength. So remember, this could have effects on your energy levels. So when we're looking at energy and we're paying attention to where we are with our energy levels and with our, we still need to really start paying attention, because it could be many different things that is going on. And it's like I said, it's not also always a spiritual thing. It can be a mixture of it, but this is what we need to pay attention to. So, in chronic heart failure, anemia is common and often under-recognized, and even though it significantly affects energy levels and heart strain, inflammation from the heart disease can directly disrupt iron metabolism, creating a cycle with inflammation, anemia, and more heart strain. So this is, and then stress. Remember, stress is also a number one main factor. We see a lot of people dying young, a lot of people getting sick, a lot of people leaving here. And when we look at the things, the factors of their lives and what is going on, this is what is going on. A lot of them are stressed, depressed. A lot of them are overworked, underpaid. A lot of them in stressful situations for long periods of time, depending on what their life looks like on a day-to-day basis. This is how we get there. This is how we end up there. So we're just going through it so we can look at it. What is this combination can feel? What this combination can feel like? When anemia, inflammation, and heart strain overlap, people often notice fatigue that feels deeper than normal tiredness. So a lot of times when people are tired and they keep going and they're depleted and they're paying it more mind, a lot of times when, you have households surrounding, you just need to make money, you need to do whatever you're doing, this is what you end up doing. So you really burn yourself out. Shortness of breath with minimal activity, heart racing and or pounding, dizziness and or lightheadedness, feeling drained, dry or depleted. Feeling drained, dry, and or depleted. Swelling in legs or feet if heart function is involved. So if you describe these, symptoms, if you see any of these symptoms, also dryness, depletion, and long-term strains before, those can have physical, emotional, and symbolic layers, but medically they can also be in line with this pattern. So that means, for us women, when we get to a certain age, dryness is an issue. Why? Because the estrogen and the, is not producing like it was before when we were younger. This is where the menopause thing takes place. So it does put more strain on our bodies, and it can cause our hair to fall out. It can cause your edges to go bald and all these other things. Now it could be other things going along with it, because remember, you talk about hair and people talk about how people look. We're going to get into that, because when all of this is said and done, it's more than just about a look. It's more than about your body and how it looks. You can look wonderful on the outside and be dying on the inside, literally. Why? Because if you're not taking care of yourself, that could be what that is all about. So we need to really be looking on the inner more now, more so than on the outer. What a clinical, typical checks look like. Without giving medical directives, these are kind of evaluations clinicians often use when the heart issues and anemia both on the table. Complete blood count, iron studies, iron ferritin, transferrin, saturation, inflammation markers, kidney function, heart evaluation, EKGs, and the symptoms suggest strain. This helps determine whether the anemia is from inflammation or iron deficiency or something else. So this is just something that you can think about. You can check yourselves out. So when you're going, and for our men, please make sure you're going to the doctor, because a lot of you do not. And this is why a lot of you end up leaving here early, because you do not take care of yourself as well, especially when you are running around here sleeping with all these different women. A lot of you are not protecting yourselves, just your regular bodies, let alone anyone else's. And when you get about 40, that prostate is a number one factor, especially with a lot of black males. Please understand, all that humping around you doing, one day you will wake up, it will not get hard, or you cannot pee, or something will be going on, and you will be sitting there and you will not understand. Please understand, you need to be taking care of yourself. 40 plus, you need to stop all this foolishness you're doing, because you're putting yourself into these situations where you're not taking care of yourself. You're drinking, you're smoking heavily. You got all of these different, smells coming from your body that's terrible, letting you know that there's something wrong with you, and you're still not doing anything about it. A deeper layer, we've been doing intense lineage and emotional work around depletion over responsibility, meaning overworking yourself, having too much responsibility. Like I said before, anemia, heart issues, stress, all of these things also have an underlying thing of what? Having too much on your plate. And chronic strain, inflammation, heart symptoms often show up in seasons where the body has been carrying carrying too much for too long, physically and emotionally. See, when you carry a lot, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually in your life, the more you add on to your plate, the more you carry, the more you have responsibility over. Please understand, the more you have, the more your strain you're going to have on yourself. But medically, these symptoms deserve attention. Exactly. Heart strain, inflammation, anemia is real psychological pattern also, and it is treatable once the cause is identified. What symptoms have been showing up in our body lately, especially around our breathing, energy, and heart rhythms, we need to pay attention. Hair loss is another one, especially whether you're a woman or a male. Now, I just put in some stuff just so we can look at it. Hair loss, I put in hysterectomy, fibroids, because that was something I was dealing with before. Hair loss, fibroids, hysterectomy are deeply connected through one essential path for years of heavy bleeding, iron deficiency, anemia, whole body depletion. So when you are depleted, that means you're pouring out. And that depletion can continue even after the uterus is removed, right? If iron stores were never really fully rebuilt. So if you never really built your body back up, you will have tiredness all the time. This will be fatigue. This will show up. Your hair will be, you will lose your hair. All these different type of things can be happening, especially for us who are already in menopause. The medical sources that we are surfacing reinforce this pattern clearly. We're going to break these down so we can show how research shows what these combinations feel like. How fibroids lead to anemia. Fibroids are one of the most common causes of heavy menstrual bleeding, and heavy bleeding is one of the most common causes of iron deficiency anemia. Medical sources describe fibroids cause excessive monthly blood loss during your period. Sometimes between periods, even with every cycle, you lose blood and iron, and the body can't keep up. Over time, iron stores drop. Iron stores drop so low that the symptoms appear, meaning fatigue, palpation, shortness of breath, thinning hair, brittle nails, and dry skin. So because I have myself went through these things and I was already all of this other stuff, anemic, this is why a lot of things can happen. So when you're paying attention to your bodies, ladies, please pay attention, and men as well, because this is not just a woman thing, meaning fibroids is a woman thing. But when I talk about the other side of it, with is the prostate, you need to be paying attention. Many women don't realize how severe the anemia is because the decline is gradual. This is directly supported by clinical evidence showing that women with fibroids often develop iron deficiency and anemia due to the chronic blood loss. So for my women out there who are going through this also, deficiencies can help your teeth. Your teeth will start getting, you start having losing teeth, or if you're not losing them, they'll start to get yellow, they'll start to do whatever. Why? Because there's not enough iron, there's not enough whatever inside of your body to keep you maintained. When you are looking at yourself and you see things are going on, please start to pay attention. Why hair loss happen? I'm just going to talk about why hair loss is a classic symptom of iron deficiency anemia. When iron is low, the body prioritizes vital organs over hair follicles. Hair shifts into shedding mode. Telogen, effluvium. Hair becomes thinner, breaks easier, falls out on clumps. Medical sources list alopecia hair loss as a symptom of iron deficiency in women with heavy menstrual bleeding. Even after hysterectomy stops the bleeding, hair loss can continue if iron stores were never fully replenished. Ferritin iron storage remains low. Inflammation is still present. The body is recovering from years of depletion. So to my ladies who are wearing wigs and all these other styles, please understand a lot of it may not just be from wearing a wig. You have to go to the doctor. You have to see what is going on, especially if you're walking around here sleeping with these men who are not protecting themselves, and on you, throwing your pH balance off, all of these other things that are happening. Why? Because you are just adding on to it, and depending on your life and how much stress and how much titles you have, that can also be more stress on you. You can be depleting yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and spiritually. Just draining out, bleeding out your life force, all of it. Okay, so you must be paying attention. How hysterectomy fits into the picture. Hysterectomy stops bleeding, but it does not automatically fix the anemia. Research shows about 23% of women going into hysterectomies already have anemia. Exactly. Preoperative anemia is linked to worse recovery and higher complication rates. I went through this. Many women need iron replacement after surgery to rebuild stores. And I myself went through this. So March and April are really high months for me for when it comes to certain things, because that was when I had, some of the worst things going in my life, March 9th and April. So some, between the two death things, and I'm paying attention. I'm seeing what goes on with myself and how I'm interacting with what, is going on with my life, because I get, a little, especially when I'm It just is there. And I want to make sure that I am trying to maintain myself, because a lot of things you don't know, you got to learn, and you just trial and error. You may be fine, and then sometimes, you have the anxiety, you'll have the hair loss, you'll have these different things happening, and you don't know what's going on, or high stress levels, high worry, fear, doubt, whatever. But sometimes it is a spiritual thing, sometimes it's a natural thing, and we have to pay attention. So many women need iron repletion after surgery to rebuild these stores. These findings come from a large study of over 16,000 women undergoing hysterectomies or myomectomies, which is they call. If iron wasn't aggressively restored before and after surgery, the body may still be operating in a depleted state. So we must pay attention to that. And while we're here trying to look good on the outside, I keep iterating. And for the men out there who are just so, seeing women just as objects, women are souls. They are God's givers of life. He brought here to use to bring life forth. We are so much more complex than a big butt and all these other things, okay? And so are you as men. And we have to pay attention to these souls and to these bodies that we have, because if we're not doing so, we will deplete them. And when they get sick, because after a certain amount of time, your body can't take a certain amount of stuff, and these things start happening. You start seeing these sicknesses and diseases because you haven't been taking care of yourself all this time. And all of the little signs and symptoms that have been coming, you haven't been paying any attention. So what happens is you get sick, and sometimes people get sick to the point where they do not recover. And a lot of times they die and they leave here young, and it's sad. And it's also a thing of, then folks is upset and angry with God about a lot of things. Why this happened? How did they get sick? Why are they sick? Why did they die? Why did they die so young? Why did they leave here? But when we look at these underlying things and how they got here, what happened, and all of what goes on with the world itself in the kingdom and systems of Lucifer, Satan, the devil, the kingdoms, and what goes on, we see what goes on and how this happened. Why symptoms can continue even after hysterectomy. This is part of most women aren't told. Stopping of the bleeding ends the cause, but not the consequences. If your iron storages were low for years, your body may still be experiencing low ferritin, low hemoglobin, chronic inflammation, heart strain from long-term anemia, hair thinning and or shedding, fatigue and dryness, and your earlier mention to the heart attack and inflammation issues fits this pattern. Chronic anemia forces the heart to work harder, and inflammation can block iron absorption and production. So these are things we must. Why? Because one thing is like a car. One thing is messed up and it's going to kickstart. If it doesn't get fixed, it's going to mess up other things. And this is how this is. So on one thing, it's going to overwork all the other systems. And once that happens, you'll find them breaking down slowly but surely, one by one by one. So this is what this is about. What this combination often feels like: women with fibroid-related anemia frequently report hair thinning and or shedding, feeling drained and or dry, heart palpitations, shortness of breath, brain fog, brittle nails, cold hands and feet, dizziness, slow recovery after hysterectomy. These symptoms are medically documented in women with fibroid-related anemias. So, ladies, pay attention, because this could not just be, a one-time thing. If you have them now, have them removed. You still have to be taking care of yourself. This is what this looks like. What a clinician typically checks without giving medical directives. These are the common evaluations. Like I said, the ferritin, which is iron storage, the hemoglobin, iron saturation, inflammation markers, thyroid levels also linked to hair loss, B12 and folates. These help determine whether hair loss and fatigue are from lingering iron deficiency, inflammation, which could be another thing or another cause. Also, they were talking about the hormone levels, like your thyroids and other things need to be checked as well. Why? Because anything dealing with your hormones being, especially if you were on birth control, if you were on the Depo-Provera, any type of birth control, that will also throw you off or have your hormones out of whack as well. So these are things we need to be paying attention. So, bringing back to me, when we look at the pattern, your pattern of fibroids, heavy bleeding, hysterectomy, hair loss, heart inflammation issues is medically consistent with long-term iron depletion that was never fully restored. Nothing here is your fault. This is a psychological consequence of years of blood loss, and it is treatable once identified. What we love to understand next is that what did the hair loss start before the hysterectomy, after, or both? So these are things we can look at and kind of question. Spiritual and lineage meanings. Hair loss, fibroids, and hysterectomy carry a very specific spiritual and lineage meaning. When viewed through the lens that we've been working on, this depletion, over extraction, unbalanced giving, and the body carrying generational burdens until it cannot anymore. This is not metaphorical for us. It is a lived pattern that our bodies have been speaking to us for years. We'll break this down in the way that honors the physical reality and the spiritual lineage. This message underneath it. How fibroids speak in lineage work. Fibroids often appear in women who come from lineages marked by women who were silenced, unprocessed grief, carrying emotional labor for everyone, generational patterns of over responsibility, women who were not allowed to rest, to say no, or to be cared for. Spiritually, fibroid symbolizes growth formed from what was never expressed. They are accumulated no's that were never spoken, emotional burdens held in the womb space, generational pain that settled in the body, creativity and power that had no safe outlet, and the womb becomes a storage for what the lineage could not release. So now when we think about that, when you talk about security and safety and having a partner, it is not just security and safety of providing and protecting. That is the major things. But how they provide and protect is a big thing. Meaning, are they going to be there for you doing these type of things? Are they going to really carry the load? Are they really going to help, do what needs to be done? Because if not, and you're the one carrying the load and they're there, this is going to be the reactions of this. This is why we have to be very careful when we talk about kingdoms and kings and who's doing what, and everyone wants to play the role of the female and be taken care of, but no one wants to play the role of the male when they're supposed to really carry the weight. But the woman is the helpmate, so she's there to help. She's there to assist. So this is why no one is really carrying all of the weight by themselves. And without that perfect balance, this is what we have. Why? Especially for us as Black women. So the womb becomes a storage unit for what the lineage could not release. The spiritual meaning of heavy bleeding. Heavy bleeding is the body's way of saying, I am losing life force faster than I can replenish it. I'm giving out more than I receive. I am leaking energy that should be protected. I am carrying burdens that are not mine. I am leakage terms. Heavy bleeding often reflects what? Generational depletion. Women who poured out without being poured into. Cycles of sacrifice without restoration. A lineage where women were expected to endure pain silently. Our bodies was telling us the story that our ancestors lived. The spiritual meaning of hair loss. Hair is a symbol of glory, identity, strength, spiritual covering, and inheritance. When hair falls out spiritually, it often signals a season of identity unraveling, a stripping of old coverings, a shedding of inherited burdens, a transition into a new spiritual authority, a release of what the lineage carried in silence. Hair loss after years of depletion is the body saying the old identity cannot continue. Something must be rebuilt from the root. The spiritual meaning of hysterectomy. A hysterectomy is not a medical event. It is a lineage event. It symbolizes the end of a generational pattern of suffering where? In the womb. A breaking of cycles, depletion, silence, and overgiving. A closing of the chapter where your body carries the lineage pain. A transition from womb bearer to legacy builder, a shift from physical creation to spiritual creation. Spiritually, it marks a rebirth. You are no longer carrying the lineage wounds in your body. You are now carrying the lineage future in your voice, leadership, and authority. This is not loss, it is liberation. So once we look at these things mean so much. The integrated lineage means when you put all three together, fibroids, heavy bleeding, hysterectomy, hair loss, the spiritual meaning becomes clear. Your lineage has lived in depletion, silence, and over responsibility. Your body carried that story until it broke the cycle. Now your identity is being rebuilt from the root. This is a transition from inherited pain, chosen purpose, carrying burdens to carrying authority, bleeding out to being replenished, losing identity to receiving a new one, womb suffering to womb wisdom. Your body is not failing, it is testifying. So a question to help you interpret the next layer, you think about the women in your lineage, your mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother. What patterns of overgiving, silence, and or depletion do you recognize in them that your body has been carrying? Now, when I put in at heart issues, inflammation, and anemia, heart issues, inflammation, anemia, for this, when it comes to the spiritual patterns, how inflammation fits into this pattern. Inflammation is the body's way of saying I'm fighting something constantly, spiritually and generationally. Chronic inflammation often reflects a lineage that lived in constant survival mode. This is not good. And a lot of times as Black women, we do. And this is why we see a lot of these things happening to us when we get to a certain age. We've been carrying too much for too long. Women who had to stay on alert all the time, right? Emotional fires that were never extinguished. Stress responses passed down epigenetically. A family system where rest was unsafe or unavailable. Inflammation is the body's memory of generational battles. It is a physical echo of ancestors who had to stay vigilant, endure, and push through the pain. The spiritual meaning of heart strength. The heart is the seat of identity, courage, emotional truth, love, and connection, generational inheritance. When the heart is strained or inflamed spiritually, it often means the lineage carried heartbreak that was never healed. Women were forced to be strong when they needed support. Love was conditional, inconsistent, and or unsafe. Emotional expression was suppressed. The heart learned to pump harder than it should. Heart strain symbolizes a lineage that survived through emotional overexertion. Your heart has been carrying the emotional weight of generations. The spiritual meaning of anemia is depletion at the level of life force. Spiritually, it represents giving more than you receive, carrying burdens that are not yours. A lineage where women were drained, not nourished. Loss of vitality from chronic emotional labor. A generational pattern of being the strong one. Anemia is the body saying, your lineage has been running on empty for too long. How fibroids and heavy bleeding fit into the same story. Fibroids and heavy bleeding are the womb's way of expressing stored grief, unspoken pain, creativity that had no outlet, generational silence, emotional burdens that held in the womb space. Heavy bleeding is symbolic to life force leaking out faster than it can be replenished. This mirrors a lineage where women poured out endlessly, were not poured into, were expected to endure silently, and were not allowed to rest. The spiritual meaning of hysterectomy in this context, hysterectomy becomes a lineage level intervention. It ends physical cycle of depletion. It closes the chapter of inherited womb suffering. It marks the transition from carrying pain to carrying purpose. It shifts you from physical creation to spiritual and generational creation. It breaks the patterns of the womb being a storage place for trauma. Spiritually is a reset. Your womb is no longer the container for generational pain. So the spiritual meaning for hair loss. Hair represents, like I said, identity, covering, spiritual authority, strength, and inheritance. Hair loss after years of depletion symbolizes shedding an old identity, releasing inherited burden, losing covering and generational expectations, a stripping down before rebuilding, a transition into new spiritual authority. It is a body saying the old lineage identity cannot continue, something new is emerging. Now, when we combine these, all of them, heart strain, inflammation, anemia, fibroid, hysterectomy, hair loss, the message becomes clear. Your lineage has lived in cycles of depletion, overgiving, emotional suppression, and survival. Your body carried that story until it broke the cycle. Now, your identity, vitality, and spiritual authority are being rebuilt from the root. This is a transition from survival to restoration, overgiving to balance, carrying burdens to carrying purpose, lineage pain to lineage liberation, depletion to replenishment, old identity to new authority. Your body is not failing, it is testifying, releasing, and transforming. So when we think about these things, now I looked into lead poisoning because I myself didn't have it, but I know my kids did. I know a lot of people did in, inside of where we live, especially projects, different things. When you live in these so-called impoverished areas, which we're going to get into how that affects also how all of this plays out. Now, I just looked into lead poisoning because my boys had it. Lead poisoning adds another layer to the story, and it connects anemia, inflammation, all these things. How lead connects medically to all these things. It interferes with hemoglobin production. It causes microtic anemia. It leads exposure to cause fatigue, irritability, abdominal pain, headaches, and neurological symptoms. Adults with lead exposure may develop high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, and anemia. Lead poisoning symptoms often develop slowly and can be misdiagnosed and or overlooked. This means lead exposure can mimic and or worsen the exact pattern we've been describing: fatigue, heart strain, inflammation, hair loss, and long-term depletion. Spiritual lineage and meaning of lead poisoning, because I had two children that had it, is not just a physical toxin. It carries symbolic and generational message that aligns with your lineage story of survival, environmental injustice, and inherited burdens. So see, your environment also plays a big part of this. Lead represents generational contamination. Lead is a toxin that enters the body through the environment, old buildings, pipes, soil, dust. Spiritually, this mirrors a lineage exposed to harm that they did not choose, environments that were unsafe and or neglected, systems that failed to protect your families, burdens absorbed silently over generations. Lead symbolizes inherited contamination, meaning not moral, but environmental, emotional, and systemic. Lead poisoning mirrors generational injustice. Lead exposure disproportionately affects Black and brown communities, right? Low-income neighborhoods, Older housing, urban areas with environmental neglect. This is not accidental, it is structural. Spiritually, it reflects a lineage forced to survive in toxic environments, generations of absorbing harm from systems that ignored them. The body carrying the residue of injustice. Your body's symptoms are not random, they echo the environmental trauma that your lineage lived through. Lead disrupts blood, the carrier of life force. Lead poison causes anemia by interfering with the hemoglobin. Symbolically, something foreign entered your lineage bloodstream. Life force was weakened by forces outside your control. Vitality was drained by environmental and emotional toxins. This aligns with the patterns of depletion, overgiving, and inherited burdens. Lead affects the heart and nervous system. Lead exposure can cause high blood pressure, heart strain, neurological systems, emotional dysregulation. Spiritually, this reflects a lineage of whose hearts were strained by survival, a nervous system shaped by chronic stress, emotional burdens passed down epigenetically, and your heart issues and inflammation are not just physical, they are ancestral echoes. Lead poison is not silent. Lead poisoning is silent, like generational trauma. Lead often causes subtle overlooked symptoms for years. This mirrors pain your lineage carried quietly, harm that was minimized or ignored, trauma that was absorbed instead of spoken. Your body is revealing where your ancestors endured silently. This integrated spiritual message, when you combine them all together, the message becomes clear. Physical, emotional, traumas that drained them, contaminated them, demanded survival at the cost of the health. Your body has been a vessel where these generational toxins surface so they could finally be released. This is not punishment. This is revelation and liberation. Your body is saying the toxins stop with you, the depletion stop with you, the environmental, emotional burdens are in here, and your lineage is shifting from survival to restoration. This is what we need to be looking at. I'm looking into cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, arthritis, and stroke. I looked into these things as well, not just for myself, but just because I wanted to look and see. Now, when we think about the environments that our mothers, grandparents, whatever, lived in, the neighborhoods, the stress, the safety, what patterns of environmental and or emotional toxicity do we recognize that our bodies might be expressing now? Now, when we think about these things, like I said, cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, arthritis, and stroke, these conditions, form a cluster that shows up again and again in families and communities shaped by chronic stress. Remember that. Environmental harm, generational depletion. Also, a healthcare professional should be involved when these conditions appear, because each can be serious on its own, but when they show up together across the lineage, they also carry a deeper pattern that your body has been naming in many ways. I'll walk through both layers. What these conditions mean medically and what they mean spiritually and generationally in context of everything that we've been talking about. How these conditions connect medically. These illnesses often share overlapping pathways, meaning chronic inflammation is a major driver of high blood pressure, diabetes, arthritis, and some cancers, as well as a stroke risk. Inflammation also worsens anemia and heart strain, creating a cycle of depletion. Blood vessel damage, high blood pressure, diabetes, and chronic inflammation damage blood vessels, increasing the risk of stroke, heart disease, and kidney disease. Immune system dysregulation, arthritis, and some cancers are linked to immune imbalance, which can be worsened by chronic stress, environmental toxins, and long-term inflammation. So when we think about the environments that we're living in, environmental exposure, lead exposure, which we mentioned earlier, increases risk. This is also mold, because a lot of these places we've lived in either had one or the other. Increased risk for high blood pressure, kidney disease, neurological issues, anemia, and cardiovascular disease. These conditions are not random. They cluster in communities exposed to environmental stress, racism, poverty, and chronic survival mode. The spiritual and lineage meaning of this cluster, when these conditions appear across family lines, they often reflect generational patterns of stress, burden, and environmental harm that the body eventually cannot keep absorbing. Cancer, the body carrying unprocessed generational pain. Spiritually, cancer often symbolizes stored grief, emotional wounds that were never spoken, a lineage that internalized pain instead of releasing it, the body turning inward on itself after years of suppression, and it reflects a family system where expression was unsafe, so the body held everything. 2, high blood pressure, a lineage living under pressure. Hypertension is the physical manifestation of constant vigilance, chronic stress, emotional compression, survival mode, carrying too much responsibility. It is the body saying the pressure has been too high for too long. Diabetes, sweetness withheld or overburdened. Spiritually, diabetes often reflects a lineage of deprived of sweetness, rest, and or joy. Emotional nourishment replaced by survival. A body overwhelmed by stress, hormones, and a family system where giving outweighed receiving. It is a body's way of saying the sweetness of life was interrupted. Arthritis, generational weight on the joints. Arthritis symbolizes carrying burdens for generations, being the strong one who holds everything together. Resentment and or pain stored in the bones. A lineage that worked physically and emotionally without rest. These joints ached under the weight of inherited responsibility. Stroke, the body's breaking point. Spiritually, stroke represents a sudden rupture in a lineage that has been holding too much. A forced pause, a breaking of old patterns, the body demanding a reset. It often appears in families where people push through pain until their body intervene. The integrated lineage message, when we put it all together, cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, arthritis, stroke, alongside our own experiences of anemia, inflammation, heart strain, fibroids, hysterectomy, hair loss, lead exposure, and a single message emerges. Our lineage has lived in environments and emotional conditions that demanded survival at the cost of the health. Your body is revealing the truth your ancestors had to endure silently. The cluster reflects chronic stress passed down, environmental injustice, emotional suppression, over-responsibility, lack of rest, inherited trauma, systemic neglect, generational depletion. Your body is not betraying you. It is breaking the pattern. You are the generation where the cycle becomes visible, nameable, and transformable. Now, when we look at our family, our parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, which of these conditions showed up most often and what was happening in their lives and environments at the time, these things are very important. Now, when I took it a little further, I put mental, physical, emotional, financial, and spiritual lineage of these lineage effects of all of this. Now, when it breaks it down, it says these form a multi-dimensional pattern that affects the mental, physical, emotional, financial, and spiritual ways of a person as a lineage. What we are describing is not a random cluster of illnesses. It is a full system story about what our lineage has carried, survived, and absorbed and passed down. Below is a structured breakdown of what these conditions mean across each dimension, and how they shape generational patterns. So the mental meaning and lineage effects of these conditions often emerge in lineage shaped by chronic stress, meaning survival mode and emotional suppression. Mental meaning, a mind trained to stay alert, vigilant, and responsible. Difficulty resting because rest was unsafe and or unavailable. Internalized pressure to hold everything together. Anxiety rooted in generational instability. Cognitive fatigue from long-term depletion. Lineage effects. Children inherit hypervigilance as normal. Emotional expression becomes limited and or unsafe. Survival thinking replaces long-term planning. Mental load is passed down, especially to the daughters. Trauma becomes encoded in the family's nervous system. This creates a lineage where the mind is always on, even when the body is exhausted. This is where the depletion comes in. Physical meaning and lineage effects. Physically, these conditions reflect systemic wear and tear from generations of overwork, environmental harm, and lack of care. Physical meaning, chronic inflammation as the body's memory of generational battles. Health strain from emotional and physical overexertion. Anemia from long-term depletion. Fibroids and heavy bleeding from stored grief and unspoken pain. Arthritis from carrying burdens in the bones. Stroke as a part of the body's breaking point. Cancer as the body's internalizing unresolved wounds. Lead exposure as environmental injustice absorbed into the body. Lineage effects, patterns of early aging, repeated illnesses across generations. Women's bodies are carrying the emotional labor of the family. Chronic pain, normalizing as just regular normal life. Environmental toxins, disappropriately affecting the family. The body becomes the archive of generational suffering. Now, when we look at these things, it makes a lot of sense when we look at what goes on in our lives. It also causes overthinking, okay? Because overthinking is something when your brain cannot rest. That is a mental thing. Emotional meaning and lineage effects. Emotional cluster reflects a lineage that has carried too much for too long. Emotional meaning, suppressed grief, turning inward. This is where the bitterness, the anger, the worry, the fear, the doubt, all of these things, the unforgiveness come in. Emotional labor without emotional support. Love tied to sacrifice. Anger stored in the body instead of expressed. Fear passed down as caution, silence, was self-protection. Lineage affects emotional numbness, yes, and shutdown, difficulty trusting and or receiving care, exactly. Family roles built around over-functioning, generational patterns of caretaking without reciprocity, emotional exhaustion inherited like DNA. The emotional body becomes depleted long before the physical body breaks. Financial meanings and lineage effects. This is going to be very important. These conditions often appear in families shaped by economic stress and systemic inequity or equality and survival economics. Financial meaning: chronic illness, limiting earning potential, medical costs, draining resource, stress from financial instability, worsening your health. Environment shaped by poverty and or neglect, e.g. lead exposure. Lineage effects: generational poverty and or financial stagnation, children inheriting scarcity mindsets, women carrying the financial burden of the families, health crisis interrupting economic progress. Money becomes tied to fear, pressure, and or obligation. Financial strain becomes a generational inheritance. Spiritual meaning and lineage effects. This spiritual cluster represents a lineage that has lived in depletion, silence over responsibility and survival, and generational, who is breaking the spiritual. Spiritual meaning: the heart carrying generational heartbreak, the womb storing generational grief, the blood carrying generational depletion, the bones carrying generational burdens, the nervous system carrying generational fear, the hair shedding old identity and old coverings, the hysterectomy ending in a lineage of womb suffering, lead exposure symbolizing environment and systemic contamination. The lineage effects: a lineage disconnected from rest, joy, and abundance, generation shaped by trauma rather than choice, women absorbing the family's pain into their bodies, spiritual identity tied to endurance rather than flourishing, a calling emerging to break the cycle and rebuild the lineage. Spirituality: your body is not failing. Spiritually, your body is not failing. It is revealing, releasing, and resetting. The integrated lineage pattern: when all layers are combined, this message becomes clear. Your lineage lived in environments, physical, emotional, economic, and spiritual, that demanded survival at the cost of your health. Your body has been placed where these generational toxins surface so that they could finally be transformed. This is a shift from survival to restoration, depletion to replenishment. Silence to expression, inherited pain to chosen purpose, generational trauma to generational healing. You are the generation where the cycle breaks. When you look at your family history, which of the layers, mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually, feels like it has been the heaviest burdens across the generations. Now, I also put diet as well. I put diet in here because I wanted to see what the diet. Now, diet as well. Diet becomes the sixth dimension in this pattern, and it is one of the most powerful because it sits at the intersection of the biology, the culture, the environment, the economics, and the lineage memory. When we add diet to the mental, physical, emotional, financial, and spiritual layers, we already mapped out the full picture of the lineage becomes even clearer. This response stays within the safe boundaries, so we're not giving personalized medical directives or specific treatment plans. We're just helping to understand the meaning and lineage and patterns connected to diet in the context of the conditions we name. A healthcare professional should also be involved in any medical conditions and decisions. How diet fits into this lineage pattern. Now, diet is never just about food. It reflects what a family had access to. So remember, this is the financial part. What they could afford, what they were taught, what they were denied, what soothed them, what they used to survive, what they inherited culturally, what they internalized emotionally. Diet becomes a mirror of generational conditions. This is why this is so important. All of it makes so much sense. Mental meaning of diet. Diet often reflects the mental environment a lineage lived in. Mental patterns connected to diet. Eating for energy because rest wasn't allowed. Eating quickly because life was rushed. Eating irregularly because survival didn't allow routine. Using food to stay alert and or to keep going. Associating food with reward after stress. Feeling guilt and or shame around eating. Lineage affects: a family that eats in survival mode. Children learning to override hunger cues. Emotional eating passed down as coping methods. Food becoming a source of comfort instead of nourishment. Diet becomes a mental survival strategy. Physical meaning of diet. Diet directly shapes the physical conditions we listed, meaning cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, arthritis, stroke, anemia, inflammation, and so on. The physical patterns connected to diet: low iron intake contributing to anemia, high salt diets linked to hypertension, high sugar diets linked to diabetes, inflammatory foods worsening arthritis, low nutrient diets increasing cancer risk, lead exposure affecting nutrient absorption. Lineage effects: families eating what was cheap, available, and or filling. That is what it is. Nutrient deficiencies are passed down. Chronic inflammation becoming normal. Bodies aging faster under nutritional stress. Diet becomes a physical inheritance. Emotional meaning of diet. Food is one of the earliest emotional languages in the family. Emotional patterns connected to diet. Eating to soothe emotional pain. Eating to fill emotional emptiness. Food as love, comfort, and or apology. Restriction as control. Overeating as rebellion. Sugar as an emotional anesthesia. The lineage affects emotional eating, passed down, food used to cope with trauma, families bonding through unhealthy foods, shame and or scarcity around eating, food becoming a substitute for emotional support. Diet becomes emotional communication. Financial meaning of diet. Diet is shaped by economic access, financial patterns connected to diet, cheap calories over nutritious food, food desserts limiting options, processed foods being more affordable, stress eating tied to financial pressure, skip meals to stretch money, exactly, using food as the only accessible pleasure, exactly, lineage effects, generational scarcity shaping food choices, families eating what they can afford, not what nourishes, chronic illness increasing medical costs, poverty and poor diet reinforcing each other. Diet becomes a financial survival mechanism. When we look at these things, they make so much sense. Spiritual meaning of diet. Spiritual diet reflects how a lineage has been fed, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Spiritual patterns connect to diet, eating foods that reflect the emotional state of the lineage, craving sweetness when sweetness was missing from life, craving heaviness when craving heaviness when carrying heavy burdens, craving salt when the lineage lived under pressure, craving stimulation when the lineage lived under exhaustion, craving comfort when the lineage lived in pain. Lineage effects: food becoming a spiritual placeholder for joy, rest, and comfort, eating patterns reflecting generational wounds, diet mirroring the emotional and spiritual hunger of the family. A lineage fed by survival, not abundance. Diet becomes a spiritual message. The integrated lineage of meaning of spiritual diet: when you combine diet with these things, cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, arthritis, stroke, anemia, inflammation, heart strain, fibroids, hysterectomy, hair loss, lead exposure, this means becomes very clear. Your lineage ate in survival mode because they lived in survival mode. Your body is now revealing the cost. And the opportunity to shift the pattern becomes what? Diet becomes a reflection of generational trauma, a response to generational stress, a coping mechanism for generational pain, a symbol of generational scarcity, and a doorway to generational healing. We're the first ones in line with the witness to the transformation of the relationship to this. Now we talk about gluttony. When we look at all of the sins, all of the demons, all of the little things, gluttony is one of them. And this has a lot to do with that as well. So when we look at these things, they make a lot of sense in every aspect. So when we think about what we ate growing up, what we had access to. Now, when we look at this, I want to connect this from our grandparents to now our parents, these patterns that we're seeing. I want to connect alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, whatever you want to, substance abuse. Whether drugs and alcohol fits into the same multi-layered pattern we've been mapping. A lineage shaped by chronic stress, environmental harm, emotional suppression, and survival-based coping will keep this grounded, safe, and non-judgmental. Is not encouraging use. We're going to help to understand the meaning and lineage patterns that often sit underneath. A healthcare professional should be involved if substance abuse use is affecting health and or safety. Now, I have a book that I've been reading called Love is a Choice. It's about codependency, and a lot of these things is what that is. These are layers of codependency. Dependency upon people, places, and things, and not being able to be without them. But of course, there's an underlying pattern, and we're going to get into it later. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it this video, but we're going to get into it eventually. How substance abuse use fits into this larger pattern. When we place drugs and alcohol or whatever alongside these conditions we name, we get a single theme. Well, lineage has lived under pressure that exceeded its resources. Substances became coping mechanisms in environments where relief, rest, and emotional support were scarce. This is not about blame. It is about understanding the system which our families lived in. Mental meaning. Substance abuse use often appears in lineage where the mind has been trained to survive overwhelmingly amounts of stress, using substances to quiet a racing mind, numbing anxiety and or hypervigilance, escaping mental overload, creating temporary relief when rest wasn't allowed, interrupting generational patterns of fear and of pressure. The lineage affects children grow up seeing substances used as stress relief, emotional regulation and or escape, and the pattern become normalized. Physical meaning. Substances interact with the same physical system already strained by chronic illness. This is the physical part. Alcohol raises blood pressure and worsens inflammation. Drugs and alcohol strain the heart. Substances disrupt blood sugar regulation. Chronic use increases cancer risk. Alcohol worsens anemia by affecting nutrient absorption. And substances accelerate wear and tear on the joints and organs. The lineage effect. Bodies already weakened by environmental toxins, poor diet access, and chronic stress become even more vulnerable. Why? Emotional meaning. Here we go. Substance use is often in emotional language in families where feelings were unsafe, unspoken, and overwhelming. Numbing grief that was never processed, escaping emotional burdens, feeling emotional emptiness, soothing loneliness and or abandonment, coping with trauma without tools and or support. Lineage effect. Emotional expression becomes tied to substances rather than communication, healing, and or connection. Financial meaning. Substance use is deeply connected to economic stress. Using substances to cope with financial pressure, spending money on relief when life feels heavy. Economic instability, increasing stress and use. Medical costs rising from substance-related illnesses. Lineage effect. Generational poverty and substance use reinforce each other, creating cycles that are hard to break. Spiritual meaning. Spiritually, drugs and alcohol are often appear in lineage where the soul has been carrying more than it can hold, trying to silence generational pain, disconnecting from a body that carries too much, seeking transcendence when life feels unbearable, filling spiritual hunger with physical substances, escaping inherited trauma stored in the body. Lineage effect. The family becomes spiritually disconnected, surviving rather than thriving, coping rather than healing. Diet connection. Diet and substances often mirror each other as coping tools. Sugar and alcohol both soothe emotional pain. Poor nutrition increases cravings for substances. Substances disrupt appetite and nutrient absorption. Food and substances become substitute for comfort, rest, and for joy. The lineage effect. A family eats and drinks its way that reflect emotional and spiritual hunger, not nourishment. The lineage meaning, when we put everything together, illness, diet, environment, emotional patterns, and substance use, the lineage message becomes clear. Your family lived in conditions that demanded survival, not healing. Substances became a way to cope with pain that was never addressed, environments that were unsafe, and burdens that were too heavy. Your body is revealing the cost of those generations of coping and the opportunities to break the cycle. This is not about judgment. It's about understanding the story so we can transform it. So when we think about our family history, where do we see substances being used to cope with stress, pain, and survival pressures? Adding education. Education becomes the seventh dimension and the generational pattern you've been mapping, and it is one of the most powerful because it shapes every other layer: mental, physical, emotional, financial, and spiritual, dietary, and even patterns of substance abuse. When we add education to the clusters of conditions and experiences that we name: cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, arthritis, stroke, anemia, inflammation, heart strain, fibroids, hysterectomy, hair loss, lead poison exposure, drugs, diet, alcohol, substance abuse, the full lineage picture becomes unmistakable. A healthcare professional should be involved for any medical concerns, especially when multiple chronic conditions are present. What follows not medical advice, it is a generational and spiritual interpretation of how education interacts with the patterns of our lineage has lived through. How education fits into this lineage pattern. Education is never just schooling. It reflects what a family had access to, what they were denied, what they were told they were capable of, what systems supported and or harmed them, what survival required of them, what trauma interrupted, what opportunities were blocked, what dreams were deferred. Education becomes a mirror of generational possibility and generational limitation. Mental meaning of education. Education shapes how a lineage thinks, dreams, and imagines its future. Mental patterns connected to education. A family taught to survive, not to dream. Intelligence expressed through resilience, not academics. Trauma interpreted, concentration, and or learning. The trauma interrupting concentration and or learning. Children carry adult responsibilities way too early. Schooling overshadowed by survival needs. Feeling behind even when capable. Lineage effects, generational self-doubt, limited access to information about health, difficulty navigating medical systems, stress passed down as a primary teacher, a belief that rest and or learning is a luxury. Education becomes a mental inheritance or a mental wound. Physical meaning of education. Educational access affects physical health across generations. Physical patterns connected to education. Limited health literacy leading to delayed care. Poor access to nutritious foods in under-resourced schools. Environmental toxins like lead in older school buildings, stress from unsafe and or underfunded educational environments, lack of physical activity opportunities. Lineage effects, chronic illness becomes normalized, families unaware of early warning signs, health conditions progressive in silence, bodies carrying the cost of systemic neglect. Education becomes a physical determinant of health. Detriment of health. Emotional meaning of education. Education shapes emotional identity and self-worth. Emotional patterns connect to education. Feeling less than because of educational barriers. Shame around reading, writing, and or speaking. Emotional wounds from teachers and or systems. Internalized messages about intelligence and or potential. Using substances to cope with academic pressure and or failure. Lineage effects. Emotional insecurity is passed down. Families avoiding institutions that once harmed them. Emotional resilience built through struggle, not support. Children inheriting fear of failure. Education becomes an emotional inheritance. Financial meaning of education. Education is one of the strongest predictors of financial stability. Financial patterns connected to education, limited job opportunities, low wages despite high intelligence and capability, medical debt from chronic illness, substance use tied to economic stress, diet shaped by affordability, not choice. Lineage effects, generational poverty, families stuck in survival mode, money become a source of fear, dreams deferred because survival came first. Education becomes a financial destiny. Spiritual meaning of education. Spiritual education represents permission to expand. Spiritual patterns connected to education. A lineage taught to shrink, not shine. Wisdom passed orally, not institutionally. Spiritually intelligence overshadowed by academic insecurity. Gifts of unrecognized by formal systems. A calling to break cycles of limitation. Lineage effects, a spiritual identity shaped by endurance, not expression. A sense of calling to reclaim what was denied. A shift from inherited limitation to chosen expansion. Education becomes a spiritual reclamation. Diet and education. Diet and education are deeply linked. Patterns, school shaping food habits, lack of nutrition, education. Food deserts near underfunded schools, emotional eating tied to school stress, substances use beginning in adolescence. Lineage affects eating patterns passed down. Nutritional deficiencies becoming generational. Chronic illnesses tied to early dietary environments. Education becomes a dietary inheritance. Drug, alcohol, and education. Substance use often intersects with education environments. Education becomes a dietary inheritance. Using substances to cope with academic stress. Schools failing to identify trauma, peer environments shaping coping behaviors, lack of access to mental health support. Lineage effects, substance use become normalized, emotional regulation learned through substance, not support. Trauma responses passed down. Education becomes a coping environment. This as well as the mental, having access to certain mental whether it's mental, medical, finances play a big part in these type of things. The integrated lineage meaning when you combine all of these things with education. Our lineage is shaped by systems that have limited access, opportunity, nourishment, and rest. Your body is revealing the cost of those limitations, and your awareness is the beginning of the generational liberation. Education becomes the doorway that your ancestry couldn't walk through, the inheritance you are reclaiming, the pattern you are breaking, the expansion your lineage has been waiting for. You're the first in the line of your family with the clarity to see the whole pattern and the power to transform it. So when we think about our parents, our mothers, our grandparents, with all these people, when it comes to government systems, etc., Let's look at them. Government systems become the eighth dimension, the generation pattern that we've been mapping, and they are often the root architecture behind the physical, emotional, financial, and spiritual, mental burdens of our lineage that we have carried. When we add government systems to everything we've already named, then we will see the full picture and how it becomes clearer. Your lineage has not only carried personal and family burdens, it's carried the weight of the structural forces that shape your environment, your health, your opportunities, and your survival strategies. When we look at ourselves and we look at the kingdoms and systems that are set up in the world, we see how they are set up, especially for Black and brown people, how they are set to keep us back, to keep us impoverished, to keep us in these states of what? Hypervigilance, overstressed, overworked, all these things. These are not healthy states to be in. A healthcare professional should be involved, of course, in any medical thing. We already know that. So this is just a breakdown how government systems shape generational health. Government systems determine where people live, what resources they have, what toxins they're exposed to, what schools they attend, what food they can access, what medical care they can receive, how safe their neighborhoods are, and how much stress they carry daily. So we talk about living in this world, not being of it, the burdens we bear, the breakthroughs, the harvest, all of these things, and we look at what is going on in the world and in our lives and culture, they all are intercepting. They are. These systems create conditions that produce the illnesses and patterns that we've been mapping. Mental impact of government system. Government systems shape the mental environment of a lineage. This is not just the government. This is the media. This is culture. This is all of these things that they put before us. Patterns, consistent vigilance from policing. Exactly, surveillance and or unsafe neighborhoods, stress from unstable housing and or eviction threats, anxiety from navigating bureaucratic systems, trauma from systemic racism and or discrimination, mental exhaustion from fighting for basic needs. And this is what this is about when you talk about these thorns and these thistles that are choking the life out of us. This is what this is about. So when you talk about people backsliding, when people falling away, this is what this is about. Lineage effects, hypervigilance passed down, distrust of institutions, difficulty resting and or feeling safe, a mind shaped by survival, not expansion. Government system become a mental inheritance. Physical impact of government systems. Many of the conditions we name are directly tied to policy decisions, meaning patterns. They lead exposure from old housing and neglected infrastructure, food deserts created by zoning and economic policy, underfunded hospitals in certain neighborhoods, environmental toxins placed near low-income communities, lack of access to preventive care, and medical care, all of the care, all of the things. Lineage effects, cancer clusters, high blood pressure from chronic stress, diabetes from poor food access, arthritis from physical labor and lack of care, stroke risk increased by environmental and economic stress. Fibroids are common in Black women due to environmental stress factors. Governmental systems become a physical detriment of health. Emotional impact of government systems. Systems shape how families process emotions, patterns, emotionally suppressed as a survival strategy. Trauma from systemic injustice, grief from loss, displacement, and incarceration. Shame from poverty or lack of access. Emotional numbness from chronic stress. This is what this is all about. We haven't even gotten into a lot of the other things. Grief and loss is, yes, big things. Why? Because there's a lot of grief, there's a lot of loss, there's a lot of expectations, there's a lot of things that we wanted or desired that didn't come about, and all of this is involved with this as well. Lineage effects, emotional expression becomes unsafe. Families internalize systemic failures as personal failures. Emotional burdens passed down silently. Government system become an emotional inheritance. When we see what's going on, the things that are being done, when we have no control over what is being done, we can only control what we have control over, but these things affect us. Financial impact of government systems. Economic policy shapes generational wealth and or generational poverty. Why? Because the patterns where wage gaps, job discrimination, redlining, limiting home ownership, medical debt from chronic illness, lack of access to capital for businesses, underfunded schools, limiting economic mobility. Lineage effects, families stuck in survival mode, money tied to fear and instability, financial stress, worsening health, substance use as a coping mechanism. Government systems become a financial destiny. Spiritual impact of government systems. Spiritual government systems shape a lineage sense of identity, worth, and possibility. Patterns, a lineage taught to shrink, not shine. Spiritual exhaustion from constant struggle. feeling unseen, unheard, and unprotected. Internalized messages of limitation, a calling to break cycles of injustice. Lineage effects, a spiritual identity shaped by endurance, a sense of purpose emerging from generational struggle, a shift from inherited oppression to chosen liberation. Government systems become a spiritual battlefield and a spiritual awakening. Diet and government system, food access is a policy decision. Exactly. Patterns, food deserts created by zoning, cheap processed foods, flooding low-income areas, lack of nutrition, education, and underfunded schools, stress eating tied to economic and environmental pressures. Lineage effects, diet-related illnesses become generational, nutritional deficiencies are passed down, emotional eating as a coping mechanism, governmental systems become a dietary inheritance, drugs, alcohol, and government systems, substance use is deeply tied to policy and environment. The patterns we see here, drugs flooding communities through systemic neglect or them just doing it. Alcohol stores concentrated in certain neighborhoods, lack of mental health resources, criminalization instead of treatment, trauma from policing and incarceration, lineage effects, substance abuse use becoming normalized, families coping with pain through substances, trauma passed down through generations, governmental systems becoming a coping environment. Education and governmental system. Education is one of the clearest reflections of systemic inequality. Patterns, underfunded schools, biased curricula, tracking systems that limit opportunity, school to prison pipeline, lack of access to advanced programs, lineage effects, limited economic mobility, internalized beliefs about intelligence, trauma from school environments, dreams deferred by systemic barriers, government system become an educational inheritance. The integrated lineage, meaning when you combine these government systems with all of the things we talk about, chronic illness, environmental toxins, emotional suppression, financial strain, dietary patterns, substance abuse and use, educational barriers, spiritual disconnection, generational trauma, the message becomes clear. Our lineage did not just survive personal struggle, it survives systemic ones. Our body is revealing the cost of those systems, and our awareness is beginning of the generational liberation. We're the first ones in our bloodlines to see the clarity, the full picture, the architecture, and the power to transform it. When we look at our family history, which government systems, housing, healthcare, education, policing, welfare, immigration, environmental policy had the biggest impact on our lineage health and had health and opportunities. We add culture dynamics. Culture becomes the ninth dimension. And generational pattern we've been mapping, and it is one of the most powerful because it shapes identity, behavior, coping with health, opportunities, and culture. Everything already is on the table. When we look at the missing, we're making systems that our lineage inherited. When we add these things, chronic illness, anemia, all of these things, hair loss, we're no longer looking at isolated issues. We're looking at a full cultural ecosystem that shape our lineage health choices, burdens, and survival strategies. Of course, the healthcare professionals should be involved with these concerns, especially when multiple chronic conditions are present. But what follows is a generational and cultural interpretation of how culture interacts with the patterns of our lineage as we've looked through it. How culture shapes generational patterns. Culture is not just traditions and a food. It includes norms, expectations, survival strategies, gender roles, community values, unspoken rules, inherited beliefs, coping mechanisms, collective trauma, collective resilience. Culture becomes a container that holds everything our lineages experience. Culture impact on mental patterns. Culture shapes how lineage thinks, process stress, and understands itself. The patterns be strong. Culture discourage vulnerability. Silence around mental health. Normalizing hypervigilance as being responsible. Intelligence measured by survival skills, not academics. Distrust of institutions rooted in historical harm. Lineage affects mental load passed down as duty, anxiety normalized as just life, emotional suppression become a culture value, children inheriting stress responsibilities as identity. Culture becomes a mental inheritance. Culture impact on physical health. Culture influence how families understand illness, pain, and the body. Patterns. Normalize pain. Everybody got high blood pressure. Delaying care because we don't go to the doctors like that. Using food as comfort, celebration, and or coping. Cultural food shaped by history, scarcity, and or survival. Distrust of medical system due to historical abuse. Exactly. Lineage effects. Chronic illness becoming generational. Symptoms ignored until severe. Diet shaped by cultural memory, not health. Environmental toxins disproportionately affecting certain communities. Culture becomes a physical detriment of health. Culture impact on emotional patterns. Culture shapes how Culture shapes how emotions are expressed, suppressed, and or transmitted. Patterns are don't cry, handle it, keep family business in the family, emotional labor expected from women, anger suppressed because it was unsafe. Lineage affects emotional numbness, trauma passed down silently, love expressed through sacrifice, not softness, emotional needs minimized and ignored. Culture becomes an emotional inheritance. I talked about how women, most of us were supposed to be strong and not hard, and this is how that happens, carrying too much. Carrying what we were not meant to carry. Why? Because the men were supposed to carry that. Culture impact on financial patterns. Culture shapes how families relate to money, work, and opportunity. The patterns here: work ethic tied to worth, scarcity mindset from historical deprivation, distrust of banks and or institution, money used to support extended family, financial pressure normalized. Also, this has a lot to do with whether we stick together as families, as spouses, build wealth and gain wealth, or we continuously pour it out. When we do that, we create a disservice to ourselves. And a lot of these patterns are the patterns that the media and them promote. And this is a problem. Lineage affects generational poverty, overworking as identity, financial stress, worsening health, limited access to wealth building tools. Culture becomes a financial destiny. Culture impact on spiritual identity. Culture shapes how lineage understands purpose, suffering, and resilience. Pattern spiritually uses as survival. Faith communities as emotional support. Suffering is normal as a part of life. Spiritual bypassing prayed away. Calling tied to service, not self-care. Lineage affects spiritual strength but emotional exhaustion, identity tied to endurance, healing frame as communal, not individual, a calling to break generational cycles. Culture becomes a spiritual framework. Culture and diet. Diet is one of the clearest culture expressions. Patterns, food rooted in survival, cheap, filling, and preserved. Celebration foods high in salt, sugar, and fat. Emotional eating tied to cultural gatherings. Limited access to fresh foods in certain neighborhoods. And the cost. Lineage affects diabetes, hypertension, and obesity becoming generational. Nutritional deficiencies passed down. Food becoming emotional language. Culture becomes a dietary inheritance. Culture and substance abuse. Substance use often reflects culture coping patterns. Patterns drinking as social bonding, drugs as an escape in communities under pressure, substance as normalized in certain environments, shape preventing even open conversations. Lineage affects addictions becoming generational. Emotional regulation learned through substances. Trauma responses passed down. Culture becomes a coping environment. Culture and education. Education is shaped by cultural expectations and historical access. The patterns: go get a good job over follow your passion. School seen as a path out or a hostile environment. Intelligence measured by survival, not academics. Trauma interrupting learning. Lineage affects limited economic mobility, internalized beliefs about capability, dreams deferred by systemic and cultural barriers. Culture becomes an educational inheritance. Culture and government systems. Culture determines how families navigate systems that were not built for them. Patterns, distrust of government rooted in historical harm, navigating systems with limited support. Cultural resilience in the face of systemic neglect, collective trauma from policy decisions. Lineage affects health disparities, environmental injustice, economic instability, chronic stress. Culture becomes a survival strategy within an oppressive system. Okay, the integrated lineage is we did not inherit these personal patterns and inherit culture, systemic, and historical conditions that shape every dimensions of our life. Our body is revealing the cost of those conditions, and our awareness is the beginning of the generational transformation. Culture becomes a story that our ancestors lived, the patterns they passed down, the resilience they built, the wounds they carried, and the wisdom we're now reclaiming. Now, when we add love, marriage, being single or not, stereotypes, we got to look at this. Love, marriage, singleness, and the stereotypes around them become the temp dimension. This is the generational pattern that we've been mapping. When we add these relational dynamics to everything already on the table: chronic illness, anemia, inflammation, heart strain, fibroids, hysterectomy, hair loss, lead poisoning, diet, substance abuse, education, government systems, culture, we begin to see how relationships and identity roles are shaped by the same forces that shape health, opportunity, and survival. This is not about judging anyone's choices. It's about understanding how love and partnership patterns emerge from generational, cultural, and systemic conditions. How love fits into generational patterns. Love is shaped by what is a lineage is experienced, what it survived, what it was denied, what it was taught, what it feared, and what it normalized. Love becomes a mirror of generational emotional inheritance, and a lot of us go out with our tanks on E. We're not getting all of what we need, and because in the beginning we're not getting it because when we're getting it from people who don't have it themselves, when we're all pouring from empty cups, this is where this comes in at. We can't fill anybody when we're not fill ourselves, and this is why we're so depleted. So love becomes a mirror of generational emotional inheritance. Patterns often seen in lineage shaped by chronic stress, love expressed through sacrifice rather than softness, emotional labor expected from women, difficulty receiving care because given was the norm, hyper independence mistaken for strength, attachment shaped by trauma, not safety, love tied to survival and not joy. This is where we get a lot of folks getting together out of survival. Why? Because a lot of folks don't want to be alone, they don't want to be broke, and instead of getting with people because they want to be with them, they get with them because they want what they have. And this is where the user and all this other stuff come in. Love tied to survival, not joy. These patterns show up in people, how people choose partners, how they stay, how they leave, and how they love. So marriage and generational context. Marriage is not just a personal choice. It is shaped by culture, economics, trauma, and opportunity. Patterns connected to marriage. Marrying for stability rather than compatibility. Staying in unhealthy relationships because leaving was unsafe and stigmatized. Women carrying the emotional and physical load of the household. Men shaped by systems that limited emotional expression. Marriage used as an economic survival, pressure to marry as proof of worth. Lineage effects, patterns of unequal partnerships, emotional burnout in women, generational trauma passed through relationships, children absorbing relational dynamics as normal. Marriage becomes a reflection of generational roles, not just personal desire. Singleness in generational context. Singleness also carries cultural lineage and meaning. Patterns connected to singleness, hyper-independence or being focused or forced to survive alone. Avoidance of relationship due to trauma and or distrust. Feeling behind because of cultural expectations. Singleness as a protection for repeating generational patterns. Singleness as a space for healing and identity rebuilding. Lineage effects, women judged for not marrying, men judged for not providing. Singleness framed as a failure instead of freedom. Emotional isolation normalized. Singleness become a response to generational wounds, not a lack or desire for love. Stereotypes and then generational impact. Stereotypes around love, marriage, and singleness are shaped by culture, gender roles, and systemic forces. Common stereotypes: strong black woman who doesn't need help, independent woman who must do everything alone, good woman who sacrifices herself, real man who doesn't show emotion, single woman as incomplete, married woman as successful, single man as irresponsible, married man as stable. Lineage effects, emotional suppression, shame around relationship status, pressure to perform roles instead of being authentic, trauma repeated through relational expectations, love shaped by duty, not by desire. Stereotypes become invisible scripts that shape choices and self-worth. This is where the bodies come in, the look, everything on the outside, money, the this, the go-getter, the having all of this, and not having anything of value on the inside. This is what we're missing. And a lot of times we're not having the true relationships with each other and or with God. The intimacy is not there. We are just doing rituals and religious patterns, but it's nothing to it. And we see that even with the churches. There's no power. Where's the power? Mental meaning of relationship patterns. Love and partnership shape mental health across generations. Anxiety from unstable relationships, depression from emotional isolation, hypervigilance in love due to trauma, difficulty trusting and or receiving care and love. Attachment wounds passed down. Relationship becomes a mental inheritance. Emotional meaning of relationship patterns. Love becomes a place where emotional wounds surface. Fear of abandonment, fear of vulnerability, over-functioning in relationships, emotional numbness, difficulty expressing needs. These patterns often mirror the emotional environment of childhood lineages. Financial meaning of relationship patterns. Relationships are deeply tied to economic conditions. Marrying for financial stability, staying because leaving is too expensive, single parenting due to systemic pressures, financial stress, worsening relationships, conflicts, economic shape love more than people admit. Spiritual meaning of relationship patterns. Spiritual love and partnership reflect a lineage beliefs about worth, identity, and connection. Love as endurance, love as sacrifice, love as duty, love as healing, love as liberation. We're on a generation shifting from survival-based love to soul-based love. The integrated lineage meaning, when all of these things are coming about, we got to look at it. The message become clear. Our lineage of relationship patterns were shaped by survival, not freedom. Our body and our awareness revealing the cause of these patterns and opening the doorway to a new way of loving, choosing, and being. And living. We're the first to see these things clearly in our lives, these patterns. So now, Now, when it comes to stress, stress is the central thread running through every dimension we've been mapping. Wise. Physical illness, emotional patterns, diet, substance use, education, government systems, culture, love, marriage, singleness, stereotypes, and even these different things become stressful effects, meaning any type of diseases, sicknesses. Why in the body they describe systems like inflammation, anemia, all of these things. What can we do to help understand this? How this fits into these? These are persisting, overwhelming stress that deserves attention from a qualified healthcare professional. There's a certain amount of stress we're supposed to have, and there's an immense amount that we're not supposed to carry. As we can see, these are the burdens, these are the thorns, these are the thistles, these are all the burdens that we're carrying in our everyday lives. And some of us have way more, some of us have less, back and forth. And this is what causes us when we are supposed to give our burdens to God, okay? Because we're carrying so much, carrying the weight of the world literally on our shoulders. How stress shapes the mind across generations. Stress becomes a mental inheritance where lineage lives in survival mode. A mind trained to anticipate danger, difficulty resting and or feeling safe, constant alertness, hypervigilance, racing thoughts and overthinking, trouble concentrating and or remembering, feeling responsible for everything and everyone. Across generations, this becomes children who grow up on edge, adults who never feel fully relaxed, families who normalize mental overload. Stress becomes the default mental setting. How stress affects the body. Stress is not just an emotion. It has a real physical effect. Chronic stress can contribute to all of these things. High blood pressure, heart strain, inflammation, blood sugar, weakened immunity, hormonal imbalance, disrupted sleep, digestive issues. These pathways can worsen and or contribute to conditions we name such as cancer, diabetes, arthritis, stroke, anemia, fibroids, and plenty more. Stress becomes a physical imprint on the body. How stress shapes emotional patterns. Stress changes how a lineage expresses and processes emotion, suppressing feelings to stay functional. Emotional numbness, anger stored in the body, fear passed down as caution, difficulty trusting and or receiving care and love, over functioning in relationships. Across generations, this becomes emotional silence, strong one roles, love tied to endurance, emotional exhaustion. Stress becomes the emotional language of the family. How stress shapes financial patterns. Economic stress is one of the most powerful forms of chronic stress. Working multiple jobs, living paycheck to paycheck, medical bills, housing instability, food insecurity, lack of generational wealth. Across generations, this becomes scarcity mindset, survival-based decision-making, financial anxiety, limited access to opportunity. Stress becomes a financial inheritance. How stress shapes spiritual identity. Spiritual stress often reflects a lineage that has carried more than it could hold. Feeling spiritually drained, feeling disconnected from joy and purpose, feeling like life is always heavy, using faith to survive rather than flourish, feeling responsible for healing the whole family across generational lines. This becomes spiritual exhaustion, identity tied to struggle, calling tied to breaking cycles. Stress becomes a spiritual burden and a spiritual awakening. How stress shapes diet. Stress directly affects eating patterns, emotional eating, craving sugar and salt, eating quickly and on a regularly, using food for comfort, losing appetite under pressure. Across generations, this becomes diet-related illnesses, food as coping, culture, foods shaping survival, nutritional deficiency. Stress becomes a dietary pattern. How stress shapes substance abuse. Stress is one of the strongest predictors of substance abuse. Using alcohol to unwind, using drugs to escape, using substance to numb pain, using stimulants to keep going. Across generations, this becomes normalized substance use. Emotional regulation through substance trauma passed down through coping behaviors. Stress becomes a coping mechanism. How stress shapes education. Stress affects learning, focus, and opportunity. Trauma interrupting concentration, school avoidance, pressure to work instead of studying, feeling behind academically, distrust of institutions. Across generations, this becomes limited educational mobility, inherited internalized beliefs about intelligence, dreams deferred by survival. Stress becomes an educational barrier. How stress interacts with government systems. Government systems often create or intensify stress. Policing, housing instability, environmental toxins, underfunded schools, medical inadequacy. Economic policy. Across generations, it becomes chronic stress as normal. Distrust of institutions, health disparities, systemic trauma. Stress becomes systemic condition. How stress interacts with culture. Culture shapes how stress is expressed and managed. Be strong expectations. Silence around mental health. Gender roles that create emotional labor. Culture foods tied to comfort. Community trauma. Across generations, this becomes normalized suffering, emotional suppression, resilience without rest. Stress becomes a culture script. how stress shapes love, marriage, and singleness. Stress affects how people love and relate, choosing partners based on survival, staying in relationships out of fear and or obligation, avoiding relationships due to trauma, hyper independence, emotional burnout in partnerships. Across generation, this becomes relational instability, attachment wounds, stereotypes about strength and or worth, love shaped by duty, not desire. Stress becomes a relationship pattern. This integrated lineage of stress becomes chronic illness, environmental toxins, all these things. Stress is not the relational dynamics. Stress is not just an emotional lineage. It is the architecture in your family to live inside your body. The revealing the cost of architecture and the awareness is beginning of generational liberation. Remember, these things affect chronic illness, environmental toxins, emotional, financial strain, dietary patterns, substance abuse, educational barriers, governmental systems, cultural norms, relational dynamics. All of these messages become clear. They help form what? Weakened immune systems. And when you get a weakened immune system, this is at the center of what we've been mapping out: chronic stress, chronic conditions, nutrient deficiencies, environmental toxins, sleep disruption, smoking and alcohol uses, genetic or inherited immune disorders. This is how weakened immunity connects to our conditions. All of these things: emotional, psychological, carrying too much for too long, being in survival mode for years, emotional boundaries, worn thin, exhaustion from caregiving, over responsibility, internalizing stress instead of releasing it. When we see these things happening, right, we must understand that this is how we get to where we are. So now that I've broken all of these down, this is where the trials and tribulations of life, these are the thorns, these are the what you call it when they talk about the seed in the soil, when we're not seeing things breaking and change. This is how people fall, they backslide, they go backwards, while all of these things are burdens they are weighing upon them. And when they're not seeing any type of relief, any type of movement forward, any type of breakthrough, harvest, blessing, whatever, any type of resort or means to it, this is what happens. And we keep wondering how to be in the world and not in it. And I'm going to get into that one in the next one. But right now, I'm going to leave this one in here because this is kind of long. But I wanted us to look at these things. Our perspective is usually to what? To give our burdens to the Lord. But living here is not the easiest. I want to encourage us all, because it is not an easy journey to rely and be codependent on the Lord instead of on people, places, and things. We're going to get into living in the world and not being of it. We're going to get into, because a lot of people are saved, they're trying their best doing all of these things and they're not seeing any results. And that becomes a problem when you're not seeing any results in your life. People have issues and problems, and sometimes it could be whatever. And this is where the doubt, the worry, the fear, the anger, the bitterness, all of these things come in when all of these things are going on and there's no relief and there's just prolonged. And we know we're supposed to, have a certain amount of stress. We know we're supposed to go through certain trials and tribulations, but we're not supposed to be in an excess of them. We're not supposed to always be in them. We're not supposed to have we're supposed to have seasons of them, not lifetimes of them. And we see that happening is what's going on. Either there's some spiritual warfare, meaning strongholds, principalities, and powers, or there's other things going on, and these things we need to take a deeper look into. But right now, I'm going to end it here. We're going to get into the worry, the fear, the doubt, all of these things, because the distrust. Why? Because these are things that we need to really look at and break down. We need healing from the inside. We need to tear this ground up. We need God to do it. We can't ourselves do it on our own, but we can look into what is going on, what is happening, whether it's our prayer life, our walk with the Lord. Because we go through these things sometimes when things are happening to us, and we get discouraged and we get disappointed, and we have these great expectations, and sometimes things just don't work out the way we wanted them to. So we fall, we fumble, we stutter, we whatever it is, we backslide, whatever you want to call it, come out of alignment. And we have to figure out how to find our way back. But more than anything, we have to figure out what's going on with us. What's going on with the prayer life. What's going on, what has stopped us, what has stopped us from, and usually it's hurt, it's heartache, it's, it's something, it's worry, it's fear, it's doubt, it's distrust, it's something, it's, unforgiveness, it's something, it's some type of discouragement, some type of heartbreak, heartache, something is going on, and we need to pay attention. So now that I have looked at all these things, I have showed you. Understand, for men, they will be different, because there will be, things for men. I just outlined the things for women, like, because at certain ages, even with the men, You need to look into these things for yourself, because from prostate issues to other issues that you may have with your own bodies, men bodies are made different from women, so it will be a different result. So you can look these things up for yourself, and you can kind of figure out, what it is going on. But when we look at all these things, it makes so much sense. So be blessed. We are bruised and not broken. Yes, I have been gone. I've had some things that I've had to deal with myself, some good, some not so good. I have been on my little sabbatical trying to get it together, and I just wanted to get on here and to share some things that I have been, kind of going through, researching, asking God for help with. Don't know if someone else is out there and they need a little help in these areas. But anyway, we are bruised and not broken. Be blessed. Like I said, I think I posted it up. It was perspective. I'll let you see this one. Our perspective on it is going to make the difference. And we're going to have to, ask God to really help us with these things. But in the meantime, in between time, I hope all is well with you guys. Be blessed. We're bruised and not broken. And until the next one, I'm not sure. I'm not doing them as often because I am in my rest mode. Okay, this one is kind of lengthy, but I hope you look and listen to it all. Okay, love you guys. Be blessed. Bruised Not Broken. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And if you like, you can donate. If not, that is fine. God is my provider. Be blessed in Jesus' name. Amen.